You know, it seems like pretty much every culture, every belief system has some kind of story about the end of the world, right? Well, today we're going to dive into one super specific, really detailed timeline that comes from a Christian theological source. And let me tell you, it lays out a pretty dramatic sequence of events.
It's maybe the biggest question we ask ourselves, isn't it? And yeah, there are a million different theories out there, but the one we're looking at today, it's not vague. It offers a very clear step-by-step roadmap.
Okay, so let's be super clear about this. Our goal here isn't to say this is what's going to happen. We're simply explaining the vision as it's laid out in this one particular source. We're just going to break down the sequence it describes, piece by piece, so you can see how it all fits together.
So here's how we're going to tackle it. We'll look at the timeline in 5 main stages. We'll start with what kicks it all off, move into a major period of crisis, then see the big climax, a return and a reign, and finally land at the beginning of eternity.
All right, first up, let's get a bird's eye view. Think of this as the high-level roadmap of everything we're about to cover. These 5 big events are going to be our guide for the rest of the way. So the whole thing kicks off with something called the rapture. That event triggers a 7-year global crisis, which builds and builds until the return of Christ. From there, we get a 1,000-year reign of peace, and then after one last judgment, a brand new eternal creation is established. That's the big picture. Now let's zoom in and see how it all gets started. So what's the spark that lights the fuse? What kicks this entire chain of events into motion? Well, according to this source, it all starts with 2 really key moments, one that happens up in the heavens and another that happens right here on Earth. That first event is called the rapture. And what is that? The source describes it as this incredible moment where all believers are just gone, instantaneously taken from the earth to meet Christ in the air. And from a theological standpoint, it's this very removal that clears the stage for everything that's about to happen next. And this verse right here is absolutely central to the whole idea. It paints this picture of a sudden, miraculous gathering. I mean, another passage says it happens in a moment in the twinkling of an eye. So poof, with all believers, what the text calls the church, suddenly gone, you can imagine the kind of power vacuum that creates on earth. And guess who steps into that vacuum? A very charismatic, very powerful world leader. The source material has a name for him, the Antichrist. He's described as this incredibly deceptive figure who manages to get worldwide control by promising the one thing everyone wants in a chaotic world, peace and stability. And his rise to power is, well, meteoric. First, he solidifies its authority by brokering a 7-year peace treaty with Israel. That's a huge deal. Then, with help from a religious partner they call the false prophet, he makes his big move. He declares himself God and rolls out this global economic system where you need a specific mark, yeah, that mark, just to buy or sell anything. And that 7-year treaty, that's the starting gun. It officially kicks off the next major phase in this timeline, the tribulation. We're talking about a period of intense global judgment, and the source is very specific. It splits this period into 2 very different halves. So this is a really crucial point. This isn't just some random period of chaos that happens out of nowhere. No, according to this text, it has a very precise starting point, the moment that covenant is signed. That single action starts the 7-year countdown clock. Tick-tock. Now look at the contrast here. It's fascinating. The first 3.5 years are marked by this kind of phony peace. The world thinks things are getting better, even while these judgments, you've probably heard of them, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, bringing conquest, war, famine, and death, are being unleashed. But right at the halfway point, bam, everything flips. The peace treaty is shattered, and the final brutal 3.5 years, called the Great Tribulation, begin. And with it comes intense persecution. And this major turning point has a name, the abomination of desolation. The source describes this as the exact moment the Antichrist walks into the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, puts a stop to all the religious sacrifices, and declares to the whole world, "Worship me, I am God." It's this one act that completely shatters that illusion of peace and kicks off the most intense period of suffering the world has ever seen. Okay, so this escalating crisis, this unbelievable suffering, it can't go on forever, right? Well, it all leads directly to the climax of the entire story, the physical, visible return of Christ to earth. This is the event that ends the tribulation and launches a completely new era.
So at the very end of those 7 years, you have this incredible scene. All the armies of the world gathered together under the Antichrist, ready to literally fight against Christ at a place called Armageddon. But it's not much of a fight. The source describes a swift, decisive, absolute victory, using this really stark imagery to drive home the total and complete defeat of the Antichrist and all his forces. And right after that battle, the Antichrist and the false prophet are captured, and Satan himself is bound for 1,000 years. This is what kicks off a full millennium of actual peace and justice on earth, with Christ reigning directly. And this whole period has a name, the Millennial Kingdom. And this quote, wow, it just perfectly illustrates what that kingdom is supposed to be like. The source material paints this beautiful picture of a totally restored creation. All the violence and horror of the tribulation is gone, replaced by a peace so deep and profound it even extends to the animal kingdom. I mean, the wolf dwelling with the lamb, that's a powerful image. But wait, the story isn't quite over yet. At the end of those 1,000 years of peace, Satan is released for what the text calls a little season. He manages to lead one last, brief rebellion. But this final uprising is crushed almost as soon as it begins, and this time he's dealt with permanently. And that brings us to the final act. With that last battle over, the whole timeline shifts its focus, away from earthly events and toward the final judgment and the beginning of the eternal state. This event is called the Great White Throne Judgment, and the source describes it as the moment when the wicked dead from all of human history are resurrected to face a final judgment. The text says a record called the Book of Life is brought out, and according to this view, anyone whose name isn't found in it faces a final, permanent separation from God. And then it's all over. The old order, the old earth, the old universe, it all passes away completely, and God creates a new heaven and a new earth. The source describes this as just a perfect world. No more death, no more sorrow, no more crying, no more pain. Why? Because as it says, the former things have passed away. This right here is the ultimate eternal end state in this specific timeline. So there you have it, a step-by-step breakdown of one incredibly detailed timeline of the end times. It's a pretty intense vision, right? You have chaos followed by order, judgment followed by complete restoration. And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. If you believed this was a detailed map of the future, how would that belief influence how you see the world and how you live your life, right here, right now?